We would taste the Cabernets first. So you got the red label, which is our Tandem Cab,
Yes.
2016. And then next we will taste our Napa Valley Cabernet. They're both Napa Valley Cabernets. The first one, the red label one, which is Tandem, is from the Carneros district. The black label is on Howell Mountain, the eastern slope of Howell Mountain at about 800 to 1,000 foot elevation. So you have the opportunity with these two wines to see, it's about the distance between the two is about 45 miles as the crow flies. One is on the flat, a little rolling hills in the Carneros district, close to the bay. So it has nighttime cooling aspects and probably stays in the heat of the day, probably stays cooler in the morning longer than the one up on the hill at 1,000 foot elevation in the northern part of Napa Valley on the eastern side. The difference between the two basically is that when we see a significant heat spell, we're talking 95 to 100, 100 degrees, et cetera. Any other time than that, I would say these two sites, microclimate, when it comes to temperature, are very, very similar to one another. When we do see those heat spells, there's a tendency for, say, day 3 up on the hill, that the temp doesn't drop as far at night. And consequently, the next day it's warmer sooner, and the heat event is longer throughout the day. And I would say that when it comes to temperature, that's the biggest difference. The one down by the bay stays cooler longer in the morning and gets cooler sooner at night in those 4 to 5 day heat events that we see. So that's a significant difference. The soil down on the Carneros area, the red label Tandem Cabernet, is more in the clayey type, and the one up on the mountain is very, very rocky. So when it comes to irrigation, it's a complete different necessity for both of them. The one down by the bay needs to be irrigated with the 10-day forecast in mind, because it takes a while for the water to get to the roots.
Oh, okay.
So if you're going to see a heat event, you need to irrigate 3 to 4 days in advance. The day of is not going to do you much good.
Wow, you must be watching the weather then constantly.
Absolutely. Can be a nightmare, The one up on the hill is a little easier because it's so rocky that 3 or 4 days in advance is gone, because the water will run right through. Yeah. So the day of,
on a hill,
the day of,
from the top down. Really.
Yeah. Oh. So the day of, and it's a hint clayey, so some water does stay with it. But that makes it a little more simple. When you see a heat day, then you put some water. The Tandem Cab has a little black licorice,
Yeah,
coconut,
chocolate.
cigar box, dark chocolate, some milk chocolate too, more mocha.
I'm tasting orange. Is there orange in
Well,
there?
absolutely,
Oh, yeah. Orange
dear.
zest is a big.
It is huge in all of our wines, to be quite frank. We are 60 to 70% new French oak in our Cabernets, and I believe that aspect comes from one of the barrels or several of the barrels that we use.
This is up on the hill, and where we're kind of getting actual fruit from is up here in this area, right around here. And so, I mean, this is quite the elevation gain right here, just this hill. And right here, I mean, this is a steep grade. So basically, we're starting the irrigation up here, and the downslope all the way down here is quite the hike. And so we got smart when we walked the vineyard. We kind of go down now and then kind of head our way back up.
So when you're walking a vineyard to look at consistency of and when it's time to pick, or even getting a good conscientious sample for analysis, just like anything, you want to believe the answers that you get. And so when I walk, I actually do a pass. There's probably 25 or 30 rows there. So I'll do 5 or 6 passes, 4 or 5 rows in between. So that when I do get a sample, or I'm tasting fruit, or we're tasting fruit, there is a good feeling about what I've tasted being across the board in the entire vineyard. I've been doing this for over 40 years. And so the true test is, when you determine it's time to pick, you have the numbers that you believe are there, and then you bring the fruit in and you destem and crush and you put it in the tank. You do a nice little mix and you get a new number and you go, damn, hit it again. So when you're figuring that you can track back and say, my sampling was good. And so that's a really, really huge part of the feeling about the opportunity to pick at an appropriate time with the understanding of what it's going to be like, what the analysis will be like, and what the future holds for that fruit. And ultimately, all decision making that we make along the way for every aspect of our work happens to be from the end back. In other words, we know what we want to produce and we know how to get there. So every single stage has that end thing in mind. What's in this glass right now?
Right.
But for you to be able to determine the steps necessary to get to that end stage, that takes 41 years of experience in the wine business?
If you were to look at our website or some of the stuff we put out, the beginning of this is my life has been one of fate. It hasn't been complicated. I got married to a woman whose parents had lived in Napa. I was 22 and hitchhiking to a park.
I love that story.
Yeah. And this young lady gave me a ride. She was going to the same park. Now it's been, as of September, it will be 48 years worth of marriage, but 49 years together. In 1978, my daughter was born in 76. Lucas was born in 82. Decided to move to Napa Valley in 1978 and commute to the Bay Area for work. After about a year of commuting, decided that we might move to Napa and commute to work, and then determined that maybe I could find a job up here. And I happened to know a few people that worked at Mondavi, and I took a harvest temp position and knowing that they were going to hire a few people full time out of about 50. And turned out that I was one of the 4 that they were planning. And 13 years later, I was managing all of their production and moved across the street at that point to Opus One, and managed to spend 21 years there, fermented every drop from 1993 until 2014. Had the luxury of working with the people, the winemakers from Chateau Mouton. Had many relationships with other winemakers in Europe as well. Sitting at the table with Tim Mondavi and Patrick Leon from Chateau Mouton during every single blend from the 1991 vintage through 2013. That's a memorable, those are memorable times. And I was lucky enough to soak all of that information up. And at one point, be a significant part of all decisions that were made, because you don't necessarily remember it until you're the one on the hot seat. Everything becomes memorable.
Yeah.
My previous background was the chemical industry. I was a foreman in a chemical plant that produced catalysts for the plastics industry in the early 70s. So I knew certain equipment that was used in wineries in those days, like centrifuges, et cetera, et cetera. So, in fact, my experience with those pieces of equipment were much more significant than wine people used them for. So I stood out, and I knew there was an opportunity to actually have a full-time job. And of course, in those days, if you wanted to be in the wine business, Mondavi was the best place to be. I mean, Robert looked at everything and anything all over the world and brought it home. And we did so many different types of experiments to understand more about how people made wine and what made a difference. And then, of course, so we got away from using centrifuges and all of those types of things. I mean, back in those days, a red wine would be centrifuged, before it went to barrel.
That's funny.
Now, the French, you look at the French and you go, oh, they put it in dirty. The more dirty, the better it is.
Oh.
So you have all those things to actually create more flavors and more textures, et cetera. So we learned how to actually deal with the issues that come further down the road. Whereas, if you want to filter your wine later on, it can't be dirty anymore. So anyway, there's a ton of that was able to be learned. And then, we here have much more opportunity than in Bordeaux, that we have consistent weather patterns. We have to deal with heat, of course, which is always hard to do.
More every year.
More and more every year.
The heat's going up. But keep in mind that when in the 70s and 80s and 90s, that 30-year period, Napa was so young in the business, and so when he was there, it was the golden years. Everybody was interested in learning, and it was fun.
There's a ton of passion.
There's a ton of passion, and everybody's into sharing. Like I'm in the barrel business as well. That's my full-time job, and this is Euclid is a serious business, and of course, but it's a passion project that my dad and I started. And but anyway, so I meet with a lot of people that know him well, and and they'll tell me stories like, oh, he invited me to like a Lee's trial back in the 80s, and like that was so exciting. All these winemakers around the valley that got the opportunity to learn from somebody else's expense, and that kind of stuff just doesn't happen today. It's a business. And
Too much competition now.
I think there's too much competition and different type of competition. Now you have people who made their living off of another industry, another competitive industry,
right,
that they flourish. in.
Yeah.
And now they're creating a winery, and it's their their retirement project, and it is definitely a different vibe.
I'm a believer in new French oak to a certain degree, 60 or 70 or 80%. I know winemakers who look at that and say, "Oh my God, that's $1,000 a barrel. God, that's just too much money. How can I afford that?" And my response is, how can you not afford it? How many bottles in a barrel? There are about 300. And if it costs you $1,000, do the math. It's about $3.33 per bottle. And that is the best $3 you're ever going to spend, especially when you look at the 21 years that I spent doing Cooper evaluation trials to look at the impact of barrels and each different Cooper and what they bring. And that is a significant fingerprint that you're going to taste in Euclid wines. And when you look at, so here we've planned here to taste today the 16 Tandem and the 16 Cabernet from Howell Mountain at the 1,000-foot elevation. And then the third wine is 14 vintage Cab from the Howell Mountain Vineyard as well. So you're going to be able to see the consistency of style. And, I have winemakers who just smell our wine and come up to me and say, "I knew that was you." I could tell
Style.
that was your
Everything
wine.
is style, and the vineyard and the barrel is a huge impact on style. And a lot of people have, especially the consumer, they think of barrels. It's like, oh, it smells like wood and blah blah blah. But the reality is it refines the wine. It brings texture. It softens texture. It can lift the
intensity.
Yeah, I mean, so like when we finish with fermentation, we're always thinking of what does it need, and the barrels are the tools. And it's not just about bringing that flavor of oak. It's about finesse and creating a finished product. And barrels do that. We don't want the wine. We want the wine to be integrated with the wood. We want it to be balanced and complex and interesting.
Not to overshadow.
Right. Yeah. It's not about.
It's a sin to be over, and it's a sin to be under.
That's right. You want to be perfect. You want to be just right. And the reality is that the wood also provides a bit of sweetness. There's sugar in the wood, and when you toast it, you caramelize the sugar, and so that's where you're getting some of the flavors from. And they'll bring out things like tangerine zest or orange zest, which we find in our wine a lot, and we wonder if it's a barrel component or fruit component, or if it's a combination of the two. But the reality is like we like sweet. I think people, the whole term, like people talk dry, drink sweet. Like we make extremely dry wine. I mean, 0.5 grams per liter or less.
Or less.
And we don't filter. We don't filter. And
most of the time, it's 0.2, 0.02,
which is like very dry in winemaking world. Like, I mean, a lot of wines out there are anywhere from like 1 to 2 grams per liter. Hang on, I want to finish this thought. Otherwise, I will lose it because that happens. Anyway, so the wood can actually bring a certain level of sweetness to the wine, of fatness, a creaminess, that we really like, winemakers and consumers. But you can have a dry wine that is not susceptible to bacteria, because remember, sugar is food. So if you have a higher level of sugar, but keep in mind, so the industry standard of dryness is like 1 to 2 grams per liter, and we're 0.2 to 0.5. We actually, our goal is to not be over 0.5. And but the wood can bring a level of sweetness, and sweetness. I say that because that's what we know of rich sugar, right? But it's not sugar. It's just the perception of sweetness.
Yeah.
And that's what we like, but then it's dry, so you can actually drink a full glass. You can actually, it's not so overwhelming that you're like, I can't have any more of this. I want to continue drinking this, because ultimately I like to finish a bottle. We open a bottle, we don't want to like dump it down the drain the next day. You know what I mean?
That's really interesting. That was a good explanation of that. Yeah, that's
the thing about residual sugar, and some people like excess residual sugar because it hides a multitude of sins.
It's true. Yeah. Sugar
However,
also hides smoke taint too. Just learned that the other day.
So so sugar has a tendency, residual sugar, to show a level of roundness and richness and texture, but it lacks complexity. As well as if it has that much sugar, you're going to have to filter that wine to put it in the bottle. Otherwise, you may have things take place. We want to be dry because we are completely always unfiltered.
Yeah. Ultimately, the goal is to make a wonderful wine, a beautiful wine that is stable.
No, the goal is
Stable. You want it to last in the bottle. You want it to not spoil. I mean, you know, stability is extremely important. And there's like the natural
Yes.
wine thing is a whole.
Yeah.
you
we
know,
want the
new
wine
thing
to
that is,
last 20 years without an issue,
Right.
and be not filtered.
Right.
But our ultimate goal when we started this business together is to produce wines that are seductive and delicious and not necessarily impressive. I've tasted a lot of wines in 40 years. You know how to influence a wine writer. You beat them over the head with wood, double wood, intensity, blah, 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 because they're
And
going to
RS
smell it and residual
RSVA,
sugar. They're
alcohol,
gonna
higher levels of alcohol bring a texture element.
they're gonna smell it a couple of times, and they're gonna taste it a couple of times, and then they're gonna evaluate it.
And then they're going to
They like to be impressed. But then you take that bottle of wine and you fill a glass, sit out on your patio, and about 3 or 4 sips in, or a glass in, you go, wow, that's way too much. There's no elegance to this wine. There's no,
Yeah.
it's just,
You're overwhelmed.
you're being beat up.
You need to move on to something you can actually consume.
So
You know, and like that's the style that we want to make. We want like I
So
want to.
we prefer wines that when you are tasting that first glass, maybe you're having with food, or maybe you're with people and you're having a conversation, and they're conversing with you, and they're looking at your wine and evaluating your wine, sort of. And then all of a sudden they have it in their hand and it clicks, and they go, wow, that is delicious.
Yeah.
And my response is that exactly the right word. We're attempting to create wines that are delicious, not necessarily impressive. I want to impress you within the first glass, and then for the
And
next.
usually that's a wine with finesse. You know, it's so balanced and not hitting you over the head. It's you're tasting it. Like it happens to me every now and then with a bottle of wine. Like I'll be in a conversation, like you said, and then it dawns on me like I'm almost finished with the glass. Like that was really good. Like I didn't even notice at first, but now it's like, wow.
Or you
did notice at first. But the point is, like, finesse is king. And there's not a whole anyway. That's our goal. Let's put it that way. This is the Claudon Vineyard on that eastern slope. And so if you're actually looking, well, let's see. So if you go this way, this is about where it gets to be Howell Mountain, probably this vineyard right here.
Oh,
Don't quote me on that, but this right here might be, I don't know what wine this is, but
Are you down in?
No, this is actually going up the mountain. So
further
the
up.
difference between
There's a little bit of flat up there.
Well, that's the reality. It's at the
It's at the top.
at the tip top, really.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right. So there's some flat.
So there's it's a different identity, and then
when we first started making wine from up there, people said, "Be careful. It's how much you extract, etc." And I've been a person who, when it comes to fermentation, Opus, the vineyards that I always got from Opus required good full extraction to get the body that we wanted. Right. And so, listen to other winemakers periodically. I hadn't made wine from necessarily up on that Howell Mountain site. And so I was listening to them and thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't extract. Maybe I shouldn't get too hot. Maybe I shouldn't. And then we got the fruit in, and I tasted it, et cetera, and I said, the hell with that. And we get hot early in fermentation, and we do open hose pump overs to extract every single thing you can. Because once you're done, it's too late. You certainly can, if you feel that the wine is a little bit harsh or whatever, but all the years that I've been making wine, that time in barrel and that 20 months or that 26 months, it has an impact. And so knowing all the things that I've learned through the years, the end thing that we want, I make those, I made those decisions when we started making these wines from Howell Mountain to extract them fully.
This is
And,
so wonderful. I
Yeah.
love this. This
Yeah.
is this is your
wine
second
number 2. Yeah.
Right on.
wine.
The great thing is I did we did a virtual tasting for 80 plus people about 10 days ago or something. And the guy who had set it up, he said he preferred Tandem over the other one. And I said, well, that's why we make that one. He said, well, which one do you prefer? And I said, depends on the day, but
We both tend to
I
prefer-
like the black one better.
Yeah. But like there's some days where,
They're both
I like the red label.
lovely and luscious.
but the reality is we wanted to make two totally different styles. And the reason we chose
So it's okay
Carneros-
to think differently than me,
Yeah. But the reason we chose Carneros is because it is a completely different site. You have that coastal influence, but with climate change and things warming up, it's a totally different environment than it was, even 10 years ago.
So Lucas came home
Yeah.
from a seminar, with a lot of people in the business, barrel salesmen, cork salesmen, winery owners, blah blah blah, and they were a number of years ago, and they were talking about. We started the Tandem Cab in 2013, and that was just after I was on my way home. It was toward the end of harvest 2013, and I just told the CEO at Opus that I would give him another 9 months to train somebody, and then I would be leaving before the 2014 harvest. And as I was driving home, I was thinking, we're not, I am probably not making enough wine to keep my wife in the style that she'd become accustomed. So I gave my buddy Bob a call. Bob and I had been working together at that point, we started this in 2010. I knew, is that only 30 years?
Oh yeah.
I'd known Bob for
Since
32 years or so. And he's got Mackenzie Mueller Vineyard down in Carneros. And so I gave him a call, all of a sudden we all have cell phones and stuff like that and could work on the way home. I gave him a call and said, I'm interested because I'd seen that there is some type of change in the weather pattern here in Napa Valley. And I started seeing it when the fruit down in Carneros bud break was 2 or 3 weeks early, which basically any issue with grape growing for red varieties down in Carneros has been a late season start, and it hangs until the rains look like they're coming. Well, now the rains haven't moved; they're at the same place, and we have 2 or 3 weeks more of hang time. And at that point, I said, we should make a wine. We should make a Cabernet from down there.
Well, the issue with early bud break a lot of the times is that ripening occurs in the hottest time of year. Like when it gets really close to ripening, it's, August, September.
Yeah, it's tough.
And it's like, the issues there are pH spikes, RS, so residual sugar spikes.
Dehydration.
Dehydration.
Increased Brix, not due to maturity, but due to dehydration, lack of water.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's
with Carneros, we can wait. We can actually wait for the fruit to mature, and it's a little ease of mind. And
down there it's easier to walk. Where you can wait, and then you go, just like the French have it in Bordeaux. They may walk the vineyard and consider a lot of things, but basically the day they're going to pull the trigger is the day when it's going to rain for a month. We're looking at the 10-day forecast and going, oh shit, it's going to be over 90 degrees for 6 days in a row. I better walk the vineyard and we better make some decisions.
So you make a lot of this wine, 286 cases of this one that we're drinking now?
Yep,
Mhm.
that is,
It's our flagship. It's our favorite one.
Um,
But everybody, like I said,
volume,
like it's
when it comes-
50-50, which people, what people like, you know.
when it comes to fermentation, volume can help. So depending on your tank size, a 1-to-1 ratio of height to diameter in your tank, not too thick a cap when it starts to ferment, there allows you the opportunity to hit a high level of extractive temperature early, which is our ultimate goal. So we're at the 4 or 5 ton range when it comes to that. Our total production is about, anywhere from 600 to 700 cases
I think we made
annually.
900 in
2019,
we made some Merlot.
yeah, we made Merlot in 2012, decided to make another Merlot in 2019 because fruit was available everywhere
Hmm.
at a limited
And people
cost.
loved our
So,
Merlot.
yeah.
So there was just constant
request.
requests. So I've been looking for a good Merlot source for,
And then we also made a Chardonnay,
yeah,
our first time.
named after my daughter, Mia Louise.
Yes.
Um,
And then one day I said, let's pick something that no one would ever dream of using. And that happened to be my middle name. And so we just thought,
Which
well,
is-
that's simple. Let's make the label
which I
simple.
love it. Yeah.
Let's make
We love it.
everything simple.
We sell wine all over the country, and we're a wine club. We don't really do much distribution. It's all direct to consumer. And a big part of how we've developed our growth is by doing traveling and doing dinners at people's homes, and it's been really successful. Last year we were a little bit affected by that. We couldn't go to too many places,
But it's Euclid
We've
has
done
a
well.
life of its own at this
Yeah.
point.
we built it that way.
We have, we usually see about 30% of our growth from my travels during the year. And last year, I traveled several times at the first part of the year, and then of course nothing. And I haven't been out in the marketplace since mid-March of 2020. I'll get, when people go to our website and order wine, I get an email because I'm the guy who fulfills it. I get the email and I start the legwork to get it shipped to you, et cetera. And all of a sudden, people I've never heard of, so I usually try to figure out who they are, how they heard of us. And you know what? It's somebody who is a customer of ours, who refers to somebody else
Right.
and refers again to someone else. And our growth, I'm hoping one day I can just sit back, make wine and fill orders, not necessarily travel everywhere. But one of the luxuries that we have is the opportunity to meet so many different
Yeah.
and diverse people. Actually, I supply the wine for the dinner, knowing that, there's an opportunity to make sales. 90% of the time when somebody meets us, it sits around a table like this or down at Feasted Forward, it is a significant wine sale.
So we're small. Our goal is to just create growth slowly and that's manageable between the two of us. We don't want to have employees. We don't
Right.
want to buy a winery. We're not interested in that kind of expense. We're enjoying what we do. We know how to make good wine.
We're going to talk about decanting versus not decanting.
Good.
Okay.
There's two different aspects of this. An older vintage wine can benefit from decanting if, when you first smell it, 20 years old, you give it a little smell and you go, what is that? And I've done that before, years and years and years ago, and think, that's not good. And you know, with a few friends, and there it is, and you're still saying, you know, it's not bad. So you're tasting it. And then all of a sudden, the last part of the bottle is just beautiful. What it should have been, what it was meant to be. So what should have happened was a very gentle decant to blow off some of those aromas that potentially from being locked up in the bottle that long. But only gentle and drink it right away.
Mhm.
You know, it will lose fruit as well if you decant too vigorously. If you've got your decanter, you're on an angle, like you're gonna pour a glass of champagne, full, not with foam like this on the top. So on the side, just let it go in where you get your glass of champagne without having to pour in there 3 times. Same thing with
Basically
an older
gentle.
vintage wine. Very gentle, let it just slide in. It just gets a teeny bit of air.
So how long would you decant the wine?
I would decant that like that and then taste it in 3 or 4 minutes.
Oh,
It's
that
no big deal. Yeah. You know, I would say if the wine is perfect, you wouldn't want to decant it necessarily because it will lose some of the fruit. But if it has an aroma that seems as if it could benefit, then you do a little gentle decant.
Does it make any difference which brand of decanter you would use? I was looking at that for another reason today. I saw some from $5,000 and I saw some for $19. I mean, seriously, there's just a huge range.
I think it's only about shape.
Okay.
I don't, you know, just like glasses, you know, these are retail. But
Well, they'll
I
tell
think
you it
it's
makes a
more
difference.
about,
They're
I
trying to
think
sell
it's more
product.
about shape
Okay.
than it is. So decanting wise, you know, I have 5 or 6 different types of decanters.
Really?
I use a Swan like one most because it has a lot of opportunity to it rather than it pours out best. The main part I wanted to discuss was how to look at young wines. Like these two 2016 or even the 14 potentially, but mostly the 216s. Do this experiment. Anybody that you know, this is something I recommend if you want to understand a wine. So I would take the black or the red label and pour half into a decanter. Okay. We're talking a shake.
Heat it up. Yeah.
A little bit like, so, you know, it doesn't have to be gentle, and then give it one of these to see a little bit of foam. What's happening with the foam is the air is getting in. Something is taking place. Then about 15 minutes later, 2 glasses, one with the decanted, one directly out of the bottle, and see the difference. It will be significant.
okay.
One of them is the future. One of them is now. One of them also tells you maybe how long that wine will last. Okay, so and I only determined this like 5 or 6 years ago because I was out to lunch with one of our customers. And it was going to be a short lunch. I told the waiter to decant half the bottle. And I realized, you know, we were probably going to drink the whole bottle. So I was about ready to tell him to decant the rest. And I said, you know what, bring me another glass. And so with this guy who's very well educated with wine in the wine world, but also with our wines, I said, so tell me which one you prefer. And I wanted to see, I thought I knew him. So I thought I knew what the answer would be. And he sheepishly looked at me and said, I like the undecanted. Because he liked to be impressed more than seduced. A few of ours that I wouldn't decant. You know, our Syrah, the 2016 Syrah right behind you, I wouldn't decant that one. It's just beautiful the way it is.
Well, I think this one's beautiful the way it is.
Thank you. That's one of my
That is
favorites.
my favorite. That's one of my favorites right now.
Yeah, the 12, 14, and 16 are probably our favorites.
If you're going to look at an area in France that could compete with us, Burgundy is the one. Bordeaux, I don't think so. And I've
Yeah, well,
been there,
Yeah, that's the truth.
but that's my that's my opinion.
But it
They're-
depends on what you like.
Yeah, they're just,
It's
they
all
just
climate.
don't have the opportunity that we have. And of course, I've tasted many, many of them. But I'll tell you one thing. Of all of them that I taste, you can never go wrong with Chateau Latour.
Yeah, but you're gonna
I've been
spend the
there.
money.
I've been there 5 times
Really?
as
Wow.
a visiting winemaker
Oh,
from Opus One. And, it's not wined and dined, but you see behind the curtain everywhere. And, get to taste the entire spectrum at Chateau Latour. And it is inspiring. And anybody who says that you can't make a great wine every year in Bordeaux, like me, with Latour, it's not true. They have spectacular vintages every year.
Wow, this Syrah's lovely,
Thank you.
really
Yeah,
nice.
this comes from.
This is toasty, and this is all once used barrels.
Oh, okay.
So it's once used barrels from the Cabernet program. So once we finish the Cabernet,
oh.
the barrels get used for this.
Yeah, and the barrels still have some life to give, but it's not overwhelming. And the Syrah
this is
sometimes
more-
can, it's sensitive to wood. Syrah can be sensitive to wood.
This is like cocoa powder, little coffee candy. You smell
Or
that
the
in there?
orange skin.
Yeah, that's why we think it's
Chocolate.
tough because we see it in every one of our wines.
Our allocation is twice a year. We have a half allocation that is a case of, it's a half a case of each wine that
Twice a year.
we have twice a year. So we
So
usually
basically,
put
it's
out,
2 cases a year or 4 cases a year.
yeah,
We do have some special circumstances where it's like a half a case twice a year
Mhm.
with certain people, but we like to keep it because for shipping purposes and logistics, it just is life's more simple. So
and but we're not only just on allocation. It's if there are people who get a shipment in October and then all of a sudden they run through some wine and they have an event coming up, and as long as it's good shipping weather, you give me a call. And a lot of our, the simplest way to do business with us is to call my cell phone and I would enter your order for you. That's, and basically talk about, if, what you might want to try. We have some wines in the library that, the 14 that you've tasted is in the library.
Right.
And we have, we save probably a good 15% of every wine. The Syrahs are less production, so they go away sooner. But our Cabernets, we save probably 25 or 30 cases to be able to allow new customers to see multiple vintages, to see that our style and our quality is consistent from year to year to year. Because you're in an allocation program, and you haven't tasted the wine, and it's going to cost you $100 a bottle, or $85 a bottle, or $60 a bottle. You want to be sure that when it gets to your house, you're going to open it, and I want to be sure that when it gets to your house and you open it and you taste that first bottle, that you're going to say, "Wow, I have got a big smile on my face."
Yeah.
Not, "What did I pay for?" Or you see the credit card charge on your bill and you haven't seen the wine yet, and you go, "Well, I hope it's good." I want you to know it's good. That's the end of that
yeah,
story.
but like so we have our allocation program, and then we have a second allocation program that is probably our best customers, but they don't want to be a part of an allocation program. They want to be more than that.
They want
They wanna
to
be-
They want to call
They
Mike.
want to
and-
be called twice a year. Yeah. But it's been fun. We've been doing this for 11 years now, and the opportunity to work with him. I mean, when I was a kid, he was the you could tell like his employees looked up to him. He was a natural born leader, and in the professional world, You have leaders, and then you have people who you just have to pay attention to what they say and do what they say. You know what I mean? And there, yeah, and he definitely was that guy. His employees, it was clear. And growing up, I was like, man, that's pretty cool. And it's definitely the Mondavi mentality. Like
Yeah.
Robert Mondavi, he had that mentality. You created ownership, you created passion, and the people that were there for those years, they were a part of it. They weren't just an employee. And so he really carried that on to tradition. And I wanted to learn from that and be a part of that. So, you know, this was actually all my idea, to be honest with you.
Right, we
Euclid,
forgot about that.
you know,
My arm is still sore.
Okay.
well, I started in, you know, thinking about it in 2003, and then 2009 we actually made it a thing, which gave me time to save up money. So, you know, we are actually equally invested, which is really cool. I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, there was a point he probably has a little bit more invested than me at this point, but you know, I wouldn't have it any other way. It's nice to be able to have a partnership
Right.
with my dad, somebody I trust.
Yeah.
Somebody who has those years of experience. If I was going to invest in anybody, it's him. And
You know, I've been all over, and we've talked about this story.
yeah,
We have people who automatically just buy wine from us because of that.
Yeah.
Because
it's the truth.
they work with their dad.
Oh,
I was
yeah,
on the
yeah,
phone
yeah.
with a guy last week, and I went, he was part of the 82 person virtual
Zoom that we
thing.
did last week.
But the virtual thing took place 15 minutes of introduction by us, and then the company did their event.
Yeah.
And then anybody who wanted to do the wine tasting went back onto another Zoom site with us.
Right.
This guy, it showed up in my phone that I had an order
Before he tasted it.
before
Or maybe
anything
he
took
tasted
place.
it. Yeah. Maybe he was
And
trying to
it's like, I went, so at one point I did the stalker thing, and I said, by the way, thanks for the order. How did you hear about us? And basically he said, it was from that. And then I talked to him on the telephone. He said, and the reason I did it was because I worked with my dad. So, you know, we've got a whole lot of great things going on here that is, that people can relate to.
So people visiting Napa, the best place to taste your wines is the Feast It Forward.
Yeah.
But don't
call us
just
so we can host.
yeah, call us.
Thank you guys so
Yeah.
much.
And
It's been
no, you know, I appreciate the opportunity. It was nice to meet you.